He's the Senior Director of Sports Production for Ball State Sports Link, the leader in sports media and production in the United States of America. Here's episode 5 of Rich's Sport Media Show with Chris Taylor. CT.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah, good morning where you are, good afternoon where I am. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, all good. You're obviously over in Muncie, Indiana. So you're a creative storyteller and producer with over 23 years of experience, and in your 11th year as Senior Director of Sports Production at SportsLink and eSports as well. And that's obviously you're the national leader in sports media and production, lecturer in telecommunications at Ball State. I'm interested to find out how you got there in the first place. So let's go back to the start. Where did your interest in the sport media industry come from, and how did you first break into it?
Oh, great question. I think I've always been a sports fan. Grew up playing sports, but never was any good at anything. Was a bench rider in sports. Didn't much see the action anywhere when I was in high school or those things, but had the opportunity. I had some family who worked in film and television out in California as I was growing up. And I was always kind of interested in what they were doing, and they were making movies, and I would see their names in the credits and those sorts of things. And as I started to look at schools and tell them, hey, I think I'm interested in production and doing radio and television, my family was like, based on what you know and what you've told us about the school right there in your own backyard, which is Ball State University, like, why would you want to go anywhere else? So I started in telecommunications production, TCOM production, radio, TV at Ball State. This is scary to say this, but in the mid 90s as a student. And at the same time, I started working in Ball State athletics in our sports information department. And in the United States, the sports information office, or the SID as we call them, are the folks who coordinate media interviews. They're the PR folks to be the go-between between student athletes and coaches and media. So I was in this role where I was, arranging media interviews for our coaches and student athletes and working events and keeping statistics and yet as a student learning to produce radio and television, and those two just meshed in a way that I was like, wow, I can do this in sports, and I want to do this in sports. And that's really where that started. And then after I finished my undergrad at Ball State University, I continued to work in the athletics department, and I earned my master's degree in sport administration. And then from there, worked in college athletics for about probably 12 years full time. And we had the idea of creating a program that has now become SportsLink. And I had the opportunity to basically come back to Ball State and start this program. And so here we are, talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. It is great to talk to you. So you were the Director of Athletics and Communications and Marketing at Ball State. What was that experience like over the 12 years? Did you learn much from it?
There's something every day that I take from those days that I use now in what I'm doing in SportsLink or in the classroom, with our students. I think there's this joke that as a sports information person and those who work in this role in athletics, they're the first person to arrive and turn on the lights in the arena sometimes, and they're the last person to leave and turn off the lights in the arena sometimes. So I just think the amount of work and how consistent and how, I guess, hard that we pushed, and every day there was an event or there was something set me up so well for what I'm doing now, working with students and student athletes. But it was great. Like those 12 years in a full-time role, and really closer to 16 if you count my student years in that department, are some of my best memories. of my life. And I take those things and cherish those things. I was able to, travel to almost all 50 states with one of our athletics teams at some point. I think when I was in athletics, I had traveled to maybe 7 foreign countries with our athletics teams. Was able to work and attend and be part of major sporting events, both in college and outside of college athletics here in the United States. And some of my best friends, I could easily say that one of my best friends was one of my former athletes, and from being that connection as an SID to an athlete, he's become one of my dear best friends. We talk almost every week, and that relationship with a lot of athletes continues. So I cherish those days, and many times I miss those days too. I miss that day-to-day traveling with teams, and being one of those 14 or 15 people in a travel party with a team. Those were great days.
That's brilliant. How important do you think it is to form those relationships with the athletes? Does it make your job a lot easier?
I think it's essential, especially for what we're trying to do. And I often hear our folks say that, they I don't know if they kid with me or whatever, but I'm kind of one of those guys. I think that I could strike up a relationship with a brick wall just because I'm curious. And I like that, right? And I think if you're really good at what you do in terms of what you're doing and what we're doing here in the United States, you have to be curious about people, right? You have to want to know what motivates them and what drives them. And at the end of the day, Richard, they need to know that you're invested in them, right? If they're going to trust you to tell a story about them, or you're going to do an interview with them, or some of our best stuff that we do, we take athletes to potentially some of their lowest points in their life. And you got to build that relationship. You got to build that trust. And it starts before you ever do a project with them. And I'm very adamant that I make sure it continues that, once the cameras are done or once the project is edited, it's not like we never talk or see them again. So, I love it. That's the favorite part of what I do, for sure. And it's very, very essential.
That's superb. And when you go traveling when you went traveling with the teams anyway and the athletes, what were those experiences like? Did you have a balance between work and enjoying yourself, or was it all purely about work?
I would say, there was a balance, but it was much more heavier toward work, because in those cases you're traveling. Here's an example. I traveled to Alaska here in the United States 2 times with athletics teams. Once with a women's volleyball team for a tournament, and they're there to play and win a tournament. And so while there was maybe a day or two of, like the 5-day trip that we were there, or the 4-day trip that we were there, it was basically like, they're practicing, they're watching film, they're playing in a game. Maybe there's a quick trip to do a little sightseeing, and then they're getting ready for the next match. Right. So, I pretty much was with all those things when they were doing those, but there was a few times where you could sneak out on your own. Another one was our men's basketball team played in a tournament in Fairbanks, Alaska. And I remember one of my favorite memories is our athletics director at the time. His name was Bubba Cunningham. He's now the AD at North Carolina here in the United States. And one of my dear friends who now works in Florida, Chris Olm, was a manager for our basketball team. Bubba, Chris, and me took an afternoon and we went dog sledding through Alaska. So the team was practicing, getting ready for their game, but the 3 of us were able to sneak away and experience a little Alaskan life. But then we were back and showered up and back in the arena and ready to go. So yeah, I think, there's a balance of all of that. And it comes down to how you could prioritize it and do your job. But at the end of the day, we were there to play sports and our teams were there to compete. It wasn't like a vacation, but we tried to squeeze a few things in.
That sounds absolutely amazing. And you mentioned there volleyball, basketball, and obviously athletics as well, all different sports. Did you have to learn more about any sports to cover them professionally, or did you already know about all these sports going into the job already? And what other sports did you have to cover, if any?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. I mean, I had to learn a lot. You know, being from Indiana, we live, we breathe, we bleed basketball in this state. So like that's one that you grow up with, and you know, and everyone knows. Volleyball is pretty big in our state, so I understood those sports. But you know, there are sports that we had to learn. We have field hockey at Ball State University, and I had never seen field hockey until I was assigned to keep statistics my first time at a field hockey match. So I had to learn it and understand that. And swimming and diving is a sport that, you know, has its nuances that we had to learn. Um, we have luckily at Ball State we have 19 sports. So outside of, you know, your things like basketball and American football for us, baseball, you know, the big sports you see, there are a lot of other sports, cross countries and track and athletics and field hockey and swimming and tennis, you know, that we have the opportunity to work with and cover. And in those SID days when I was in the athletics department, certainly I had to learn those sports and understand what they were. So I feel like I'm pretty well versed in just about any American sport, anyway.
That's incredible to know all about 19 sports. When you were younger, did you play any of those sports yourself?
I was a basketball kid, obviously, like I think everyone. My father is fast, but you know, we had the hoop in the driveway growing up, and we would go out and shoot basketball. And if you if you travel through our state, you can pretty much see a basketball hoop in just about at least every other driveway, probably in the state. So I think everyone at some point plays basketball growing up in Indiana, but I wasn't very good. I loved it. And in many ways, I think that's kind of drew me into what I'm doing now. It was like, I love the sport. I knew I couldn't play it, but I wanted to be connected to it in some way. So baseball, or I'm sorry, basketball. I played some baseball really young in my age, you know, like some youth leagues, but basketball was really the only sport that I played. And when I say play, I mean very, very loosely.
Well, taking part's the main thing, isn't it? Um, you're obviously the director of athletics. I think you mentioned a couple of people you worked with earlier as well. But how many people were on that communications and marketing team? Was it big or small?
Let's see. In my day in that office, we had a staff of myself, one, two, three, four. I think we had a staff of five full-time folks, and then two graduate assistants at that time, and then we had a student staff of probably, you know, 5 to 10 students. So it was pretty large, and you know, for us, we each were assigned a sport. So I just mentioned that at Ball State, there's roughly 19 sports, or at any point there are 19 sports. You know, so like I was the contact maybe for men's basketball, men's and women's golf, soccer. Maybe those are my sports. And then one of our other full-time staff members took volleyball or football and those things. So while we all helped each other, we were the main contact for certain sports. So it was a pretty big staff in those days for sure.
That is a huge team of staff, isn't it? And after your 12 years there, then where did you go next?
Yeah, in 2000, man, I'm trying to think what that was. Probably late 2007, early 2008. I I took a new job in Nashville, Tennessee, as a senior project manager in basically corporate communication. If those who truly know me know that I'm a huge country music fan. I love Nashville, Tennessee. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, and I feel like I can say that. So I was very excited to try to go down there and start doing stuff. Um, I learned a lot. One of the things I learned is that I need to research jobs a little bit more, because I probably took the job because it was in Nashville, and I didn't take the job because of what the job was. So I was in over the better part of 2 years. I was in Nashville, um, working in corporate communications. I hated the job. It was a desk job, and for the first time in my career, like, I actually went in and sat at a desk, from like 8 to 5, and I quickly learned that's just not who I am. Uh, but it was great. I learned a lot, made good contacts. I love Nashville. Someday in the future, I see myself back in that area. In the next chapter of my life, maybe in that area. I think it would be a great place to go back and live. But it was in corporate communication, working with agencies, some in sports. Most of it was out of sports. So I just really kind of lost and left what I really loved, I guess. And then had the opportunity to come back to Ball State and start Ball State Sports Link, which is something that we had talked about when I had worked in the athletics department previously anyway. There's a chance to come back, kind of start this, see where it would go. I'll be honest with you, I didn't think that 10 or 11 years later I would still be doing this. Initially it was like, okay, yeah, let's go back, let's get this, we could create something, gets me back doing sports, gets me back doing production and media that I love. I'll freshen up on my skills, and then I'll move on and find the next job. But I also knew that we could build something pretty special here at Ball State. And we've had great support, and we've had great success. And now, really, this is now my 11th year as director of our sports production program at Ball State. It's kind of like my baby in a sense. So, like, I'm not ready to leave it just yet.
Yeah, exactly. That must have been strange, going from traveling around with athletics and other teams and stuff at Ball State to a desk job. What was that sort of transition like?
Horrible. I thought, honestly, I thought at the time, like, wow, okay, this is going to be great. Like, I'm going to go do the 8 to 5 job and then, like, have a normal life. And people who work in sports, as and probably those listening to the podcast for the most part, sports usually happens every day, after hours, in the evenings, on the weekends, on holidays. So I was excited, I think, at one point to be like, wow, I could work Monday through Friday and be home by 5 and have my weekends free, have my holidays free. And I'm telling you, it was probably less than a month into that job in Tennessee where I know I called home and I talked to my mom, and I was just like, I can't do this. This is not me, and no offense to those who do and can do that job, because there are those people too, but I'm just not wired that way. And what you said is actually very accurate. Traveling with those teams and being around those teams and always on the go and doing something, like, I couldn't turn that motor off. I was looking to get back into something where I was active. Agency work, I guess, is what you could call it. And for those who work in agencies or do those things, or in corporate, you have clients and you have billable hours, right? And in the role that I was in, I literally had to, every 30 minutes of my day, I had to mark down what client I was working for and what I was working on, so that they could be billed for what I did. And never in my life had I went 30 minutes at a time in my day. So those were just things that were crazy for me. And I also consider it a blessing, because, like, all right, I tried it. I tried that corporate life. I tried doing those things, and I know that I'm not cut out for that. So I learned there that I don't really have any intention to go back and do those sorts of things again.
And you said you really wanted to live in Tennessee. Obviously, you didn't enjoy the job, but did you make the most of that experience anyway? Were there positives?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a lot of friends there. I made a lot of friends there. I had a lot of friends before I moved down there in the industry and in the music industry. Um, and I joke, the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 5, I hated, but the 5 to 9 or the 5 to 5 a.m. After work, there was music everywhere. There were honky tonks. There was live music. Such a creative area. I get out of work and go home and shower up and then go watch friends play music or go to a concert. I loved that aspect of it. Um, but the day part and the job was I just couldn't do that.
At least you made the most of it anyway. Um, and to SportsLink, who created SportsLink? Did you create it, or did someone else?
Yeah, it was an idea that came when I was working in athletics. We were trying to find ways to get more video content. And again, I hate to say this because it starts to make me feel old, but in the late '90s, early 2000s was really when internet and websites were starting to boom, and the demand for more and more content and video content, all that started really really growing. Um, and as an SID working in athletics, we wanted to have video and we wanted to have radio and we wanted to have stories on our athletes that just weren't print. Um, so at that time, I was working with, his name is Dr. Joe Mashevitz. He was the chair of the TCOM department at Ball State. And he started giving me a couple of students for credit when I was in athletics who could come in and shoot video and loan us some cameras and stuff from the radio TV department. Um, and so we started this real early form of what now has become SportsLink. Um, and then when I was gone from the university in 2008-9 era, Dr. Joe and some teachers in the TCOM department basically started a pilot program off of those ideas. And it's weird because when I was in Nashville, like I was connected and watching what they were doing. And Dr. Joe reached out. He's a mentor to me, and I had reached out to Dr. Joe. He knew that things weren't going as well as I professionally wanted them to go in the position I was in Nashville. And he's like, look, we tried this SportsLink program as a pilot program in the fall of 2008. We had 4 instructors in our department who were doing it as an overload or just seeing if there was like merit to this. And he's like, I think there's merit to it, but he's like, I have to hire someone to come back and like lead it if it's going to stick. And he's like, would you want to come back? He's like, I can offer you a 10-month contract. There's no guarantees that it would last more than 10 months. But he's like, if you would like to come back and try to build this and see where it would go. And I was like, absolutely. Like, I'll start as soon as you can get me there. And then I started in 2009, August of 2009. And since then, we've just continued to grow it. And now it's become the first 4-year sports production academic track in the United States, the only one. We've grown from, my first year, I think we had about 8 or 9 students. Now we're over 50 in our program. We've built a beautiful new facility and we have all this lab space and we're doing great work and a partnership with ESPN. So it's really, really special. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it is like it's like my baby in a sense. I'm very, very vested in it. And I put a lot of time and a lot of energy into what we do. And I love it.
10 months originally, and here you are now.
I know it's crazy to think about, but Ball State is a special place. Like it's a campus, it's a community where like you can be yourself, you can be creative, you're supported, and in most cases, if Ball State has never told me no on anything, right? Like, if I could justify why I wanted to do this, or hey, could we go try to do this? certainly there's been times where, oh no, we can't do that, or you can't do that. But like, I probably could count those times on one hand over the course of 11 years. Uh, and I think at the end of the day, all anyone like me or a creative type can ask for is being in a position where you're supported. You have the resources that you need to do, and you can take chances and be creative. You can also take chances and fail, but if you fail, you're not punished for them necessarily. You learn from them, and I think I have certainly had other opportunities to go to other schools here in the United States and work in a similar program or work in an athletics department. And someday maybe I will do that. But right now, I've looked at those, I've entertained those, I've interviewed at some of those schools. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, I can do all those things at Ball State. And I have, a president and a dean and a chair, and we have an athletics director. Like, everyone is supportive of what we do. And I think that's extremely rare sometimes. But right now, it's like, this is good. We're doing everything that we need to do. And certainly we would like to do more, and we hope that we could do different things. But honestly, I also think, the pandemic that we've been in for now almost a year, and hopefully it's on its last leg of what we've all been going through. But like, it also has allowed me to see that, that the grass is not always greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. And I think that we've had the chance to really water and grow what we've done here. And I think the last year has made me appreciate that even more.
Certainly an incredible story. And I'm going back to the start when you had 8 or 9 students, you were just starting off. How did you sort of market the course and convince people to want to do it?
Yeah, I remember this, like literally that first semester in August of 2009, I was pulling kids from the hallway, like physically and realistically, like going down the hallway and like saying, "Hey, are you interested in sports media?" To grow that number. We had a good core group. There were students who were part of that 2008 pilot program that are instructors at Ball State, and at least 3 of those instructors are still within our in our TCOM department. So there was a good base of some students that were part of that 2008 pilot program that maybe were seniors or juniors, that first year I started. So they helped recruit other students, and at the end of the day, I think we just started doing consistent work. Wasn't maybe the best work, but we started to build our brand. We started to produce content, and it was labeled or branded as SportsLink. And then I think it was pretty good content. It was something different that hadn't been done at Ball State, and then more people started to see it, and then it started to get picked up, and we just started to build that brand. I think it goes back to the quality of work, honestly, and the quality of the students and the effort that they put into it. And then once we kind of had that look and doing stuff, then people were like, "Wow, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that." And that's kind of how we grew it. But yeah, that first semester, I know I was going through the hallways, and if anyone looked athletic or looked sporty or looked like they could be a really good creative person, I would be like, "Hey, are you interested in sports?" And we found a few by doing that, which is great.
Did it conflict with any other courses at the university as well, like the likes of broadcasting courses or anything like that? And did anyone make a crossover from maybe one of those courses?
I think so. Like we already had, like Ball State is a really good production school in terms of television and film and radio and those things. So there were production courses that were already in place, like your audio and video production classes. But what we were able to create was like that area of specifics. So like you could do sports production where, prior to SportsLink, there wasn't like a formalized area to do sports stuff. It was just maybe part of these other things. So it's certainly like we did that. And, we saw folks who were in our journalism side at times, or our news, who were doing sports that way, but really didn't want to be like the sports anchor or sit behind the desk. A few of those folks, maybe, I don't want to say crossed over, but, came into this because it's truly what they wanted to do. And it was the first time that it was available at Ball State to do that. And since that time, we still get a few folks who are interested in other areas, and from sport administration or sports marketing. We get some marketing students who are interested in, and we find ways that students who maybe aren't into necessarily sports production can still be part of what we do. Because I think at the end of the day, we're trying to build someone in our program that could produce sports, can create content, can be a storyteller, could sell tickets or revenue to sporting events. And you kind of have this whole wheelhouse, or what I like to call toolbox of tools, by the time you leave, that makes you very marketable and very employable in our industry. So yeah, that's kind of where that has evolved.
And the course has obviously grown massively as well. Has the course content changed much since it first began?
It has, but I think the one thing that hasn't changed is, from day one, I had a mission, vision, and a value statement of what I wanted to do in SportsLink, and we added a new vision and a value just this year. So in my 11th year, we've kept the original 5 and we've added a 6th. But in terms of course content and what we're doing, it has always been the foundation of storytelling. How are we telling a story? And how does that transpire then into a radio broadcast, into a television broadcast, into a hype video or a social media piece of content? Or how is that into a layered feature story that I think we're known for? And I'm extremely passionate about doing those types of things. So storytelling has always been our foundation. And while the medium has changed and maybe the delivery has changed, being able to tell a story has not. So I'm big on that foundation of what's the story? How do you develop the story? How do you structure a story? How do you move through a story? And if you can do those things, I kind of have this line: the story still wins. So even with all the changes in content and streaming and distribution, like, a good story is still going to be a good story, and it's going to stick out on whatever platform it is. And then the other thing that changed from when we originally started to now is that we've become an ESPN production partner. So in the United States, ESPN has partnered with schools to produce content. So about, I don't know honestly what year that was, but maybe about halfway through, so maybe like 5 years ago, our conference that we play in, the Mid-American Conference, teams throughout the Midwest as part of this conference, became an ESPN conference, basically. And then production requirements started to come down to the schools, where schools would be asked and eventually required to produce X number of events that would air on an ESPN platform. Well, we were the first one in our conference to do that consistently, because we were already doing it, in SportsLink. All we had to do was kind of adapt to the ESPN model of production and incorporating their look and their graphics and meeting their production standards. So now that, now every live event that we produce, for the most part, will end up on an ESPN platform produced by students in all positions. So that changed about midway through. Not so much what we were doing, it just elevated onto a national stage, and what we had been doing set us up very nicely to be successful with that.
That must be brilliant for the students working with ESPN as well. How do you sort of prepare the students to work in that environment, and what year do they have to be in, or do they do that from the start?
Well, we're excited to say that, basically from day one at Ball State, a student who comes into our program could be could be in and basically are active from day one. I typically, I don't really differentiate between our students if they're a freshman or a senior, if you will, a first year student or a fourth year student for us. Um, it's who wants to work and who's putting forth the effort and they want to be involved. Um, so, I think we try to prepare, when you think about athletics and coaches and all those things that we all deal with, we definitely watch film, if you will, right? Like we'll watch broadcasts of sporting events and be like, here's where cameras are placed and these are why the cameras are here. And this is why or what or how we want you on this camera to operate your camera when we do this event tomorrow night or whatever. And in many ways, we'll come back after the event and watch a little, clip of film in our class and be, all right, here's the event we just broadcast on Sunday. Let's watch a 10-minute stretch of it. And we'll just make sure and we'll see what we did right, what we did wrong, and what we can improve the next time. The true learning, though, happens when you're actually in the seat. So while we try to train and get people prepared as much as we can in the different roles of a production, nothing replicates sitting in that seat in a control room or behind a camera with a headset on, and you have someone on the other end connected at ESPN who says, okay, we're live in 1 minute, we're live in 30 seconds, and they start to count you down. And then literally, like, you got to go, we got to do it. And that's where you truly learn, I think. And as a staff, we're there to make sure that, we keep it on the track, but also give them enough space to learn and fail and grow as we go. Right.
Are there any limitations on the number of students that can work on one particular broadcast, and how do you sort of choose who works on what?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it would depend on what the sport is that we might be producing. But in most cases, we would have pre-COVID, we would definitely have, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20-ish students working on any particular broadcast. Those numbers have changed a little bit due to social distancing and some restrictions, but that's also starting to ease up a little bit. But, most ESPN requirements are at least a 3 or a 4 camera broadcast to be valid for an ESPN platform. We typically, depending on what the sport is, we would at least probably go to 6 or 8 cameras, kind of try to follow the more national level ESPN productions in major sports that you see. So, we would have producer, a director, a technical director, an associate director. We'd have a graphics person, maybe a graphics assistant. We'd have 2 replay operators, 2 people on audio, play-by-play talent, sideline, stage manager, timeout coordinator, and then however many cameras that we would have, whether that be 4 or 6 or 8 operators at times. So it can vary on the sport, but, consistently there's 12 to 15 students working every broadcast. And at times that number could go over 20.
That's amazing. And do they alternate roles from one event to the next? Obviously, they won't on the same event, but like if they do one event, will they do a different role on the next event?
Yeah, and part of our philosophy is as a academic program is to get people exposed and trained on all the different roles. But what we will start to see is a student who it could work both ways, honestly. One of my favorite things is when a student sits maybe in a seat for the first time, and then somewhere you just see it in their eyes or it clicks. Like they're like, wow, I like this position. And I love it as an instructor that when we're done with a broadcast, the student looks at me and is like, I never thought I'd like that, but I think I really like directing. And then in most cases, you were like, yeah, you did a really good job and you need to direct more. But we could also have the case where someone, gets out of that seat for the first time and they're sweating bullets and they're like, look, I don't want to do that position again. Like, that's not for me. and that's okay. Like that's why we're here. That's why we learn. But we'll start to play to people's strengths. Like if someone is really good in a certain position, and they say, hey, I really like that. I could see myself doing this as I move forward in my career. Then we'll start to give them more opportunities. But at the end of the day, we want everyone to be able to at least be knowledgeable enough about every other position on the crew so that at least you know how they communicate and how they operate together. So if you're a producer or a director and you're asking your cameras to get a certain shot, at some point, you're also the camera operator, and a different producer and director are telling you to get the shot. And when you're in that role, then hopefully you learn, hey, when I'm a director, I know I needed to coach my cameras this way because I just learned this. Or when I'm a camera operator, I know I want to make sure I'm listening to my director to say this. That's when you see it. And frankly, we're just starting to get that flow this year because we haven't had those opportunities due to the pandemic. But now we're back. We're doing live productions, and we feel like we're a little bit behind because we had a semester of not doing anything really from a production standpoint. And we're starting to get that groove right now this semester. It's exciting when you see that.
And you obviously get there's a lot of people on the course already. People who go to apply for the course, what do you expect from them?
I think at the end of the day, we expect a good person. I know that's cliche, but we have an application process. We want to see a body of work. We want to see a portfolio of work. What have you done? It doesn't have to be like great work, but we want to see that you've at least started to do something. And we know that here in the United States, not everyone coming from a high school maybe has the opportunity to do radio or television broadcast, although that's becoming more and more prevalent in the United States, especially in sports at the high school level. But there's a written essay that's part of our application process, and that really is I take that to heart, and so does the other members of our staff. Do they just want to work in sports or do sports because it's cool and they can sit at the half court or they can go to games, or do they want to be part of sports because they want it to be a career? And you can quickly kind of see if they're just a fan through a written essay, or if they actually understand and they know what they want to do. So there's that aspect of it too. And we're also looking for potential. How can we, does this person have the potential? Have they done enough, or have they written well enough to say that this is what they want to do? And do we think they have a potential? Are they going to work to get there? And that's kind of part of our true application process.
That's brilliant. And the whole storytelling aspect of it obviously took you to Wales, to Global Partners Cardiff Metropolitan University. How did that come about?
I'm so proud of that thing with my colleague Joe Towns at Cardiff Met. Like that, this whole thing has just been brilliant. The short answer as to how all this came about is as Joe Towns and Cardiff Met were starting to develop the sport broadcast program there. It appeared there wasn't many mentors or programs, in the United Kingdom, at least, that does this program or did something like this. And so through the internet and searches, Joe and others at Cardiff Met found us and what Ball State was doing. And this is kind of what they were wanting to do at Cardiff Met. And it's really unique, because we're basically, we're the first 4-year digital sports production track in the United States. And Cardiff Met is starting both now the undergrad and the master's program that they've had for a few years. So that connection was just awesome. It basically was an email connection, asking about how we did things and how we built our program. Those conversations continued for a few years, a few months, a year, I guess. And then Joe and Dr. Hardman from Cardiff Met visited the United States and came to Ball State. And we met in person. And then really that's kind of where just like Joe and I became like really super connected. And we're like, wow, let's do this. Let's find a way to make this happen. And so from there, it went to like guest lectures or virtual sessions and Skype sessions, and me talking to the Cardiff Met folks and Joe talking to our kids, and that led to Joe and Lucas, who are part of the program now, visiting a couple years ago, which then led to us bringing students to Cardiff Met last year, and now we're in this global partnership, and hopefully, when the pandemic eases, we'll be welcoming some Cardiff Met students to the United States, and we'll be taking another group of students back over your way. Hopefully, maybe in 2022, if things get better.
And you took the students over just prior to the pandemic, obviously, to create the Transatlantic Storytelling Project. What was that process like? Because you obviously came over for, was it about 10 days or so, and had to create this documentary?
Yeah, it was a 12-day trip, but really 10 days on the ground there in Cardiff. And I still can't believe all we did and what we did while we were there. And like, it is something I will never forget in my life of what that was, and the relationships that we built, and the things that we did. It was my second trip to Wales. First time bringing students, but my second trip overall after coming over the year before to meet and explore with those guys. But we worked really hard on it. I'm not going to lie. Like, in January, February of 2020, we were working with our students and identifying potential stories we wanted to tell, and then researching and trying to connect with the athletes and coaches, so that when we hit the ground for those days in Wales, that like we were ready to go, and we did. Man, we went every day, every hour it seemed, but it was so much fun, just unbelievable. But I think the thing that is the most crazy about what happened is that was early stages of this thing called the coronavirus and COVID. There are no identified cases anywhere other than, I think, in the Asian countries, China or those things. And there was some initial thought, early here in the United States, and even on the Cardiff Met side, like, well, we need to be aware of this, but like no one knew what was going on at the time. And so like we traveled, and then we left late February in 2020. And we got there, and then you started to see a few more cases pop up across the world and the United States. I remember specifically, basically on day 3 or 4, we were going to go to Mumbles and out to the Gower. We were going to do a story. We did the story still on Harrison Walsh, the great discus and athlete that you guys have there. But on that 3rd or 4th day of our trip, we were going to go. Harrison's from Mumbles. We were going to go to Mumbles and shoot Harrison on the, back at home and walking the streets and out on the Gower, and all these scenic shots and all these crazy things back in his hometown or his home city, his home village, I guess. And I remember Joe saying, "Hey, Mumbles just had its first case confirmed of COVID. And I don't know that we should probably go there." And we're like, oh my, okay, this is getting real. So we didn't go. We went to other areas. We still did the story. And then, while we were there, we started hearing more and more cases come up and doing things. But yet it was still so unknown to everyone. And then basically the final night that we were in Wales, we went to a Cardiff Devils hockey match. And then the next day was our last day in Wales. And we got a message from an email from Ball State saying, hey, if you guys are on spring break, you're traveling out of the country, we're really concerned about the coronavirus and COVID. And, we may not be able to get you back in the country. We need to be following what's going on. And then we're like, okay, now this is real. So we got back into the United States. We landed on March 9th. I'm quite positive about 24 to 36 hours later is when the World Health Organization said that the coronavirus is a global pandemic. And then on March 12th, I think it was March 12th, is when basically everything shut down. And so we went through the process of, okay, well, we just went to Wales. We were going to come back and spend the next 2 months on campus editing this documentary and working on this, as a group. And less than 48 hours after we landed back in the United States, we were all in different places. We were home. We couldn't go anywhere. We're like, okay, what's going to happen? So our students worked on their projects, and we edited this documentary remotely from about 7 different states, which is just crazy to think about, but also makes you like just super proud of how it turned out. That was a really long answer, but crazy. It was just crazy.
Exactly. As long as you got the documentary complete, that was the main thing. And of course, the documentary ended up on ESPN in the US and on Premier Sports in the UK as well.
Yeah, crazy. We're super proud of it, and I think it's received some television play here in the United States. Obviously, Premier Sports over in the UK, which was a big deal for all of us, and certainly for the folks at Cardiff Met and for the people who were part of our documentary. I think it was pretty cool to see it on linear television in the UK, and it's just been a tremendous project, and I can't wait to get to the next step and come back and do a different documentary and find more athletes and more stories to tell. And I truly believe at some point we're going to have students from Cardiff Met come over here and do the similar kind of thing, doing that stories on our athletes and sports here in the United States. And it's you never want to say a legacy type thing, but like when you go back and look at what Ball State and Cardiff Met has done, like that has become in a sense of like a legacy project that not many people can say. So I think. I know I speak for Joe, and I certainly speak for myself and Ball State. Like we're so excited and proud of what that turned into, that it's just kind of taken a life of its own now. Well, in my first visit to Wales, I think it was in 2019. It was myself and Brad Bailey, who was on my staff.
More of your students
we came over in the spring
to Wales.
As we were like, okay, this thing can work, but our university wanted us to go over and visit, look at the university, try to plan what our students would be doing if we were able to take students. So in a sense, it was a scouting visit in 2019, and we met with the students and did lectures, and Joe and the group there was just amazing in terms of like showing us around. But with Ollie, it was like, hey, we're gonna go over to Cardiff City FC, where one of our sport broadcast students, Ollie Thompson, is now working. And Ollie gave us a tour of the stadium, and we did all these different things, and that was my first chance to meet Ollie. And then later that night or throughout the time we were there, he came by, and Maya went out to a pub or two and chatted and just started talking about different things. And Ollie indicated that he had a real interest in American sports, specifically basketball, that he would love to get over and see what we do. And I had a graduate assistantship opening up in 2020. And even though he already had his master's and he was working professionally, there was interest from Ollie's standpoint that, well, yeah, I think I might be interested in coming over and doing that. And really that first meeting, like that tour of the stadium, Cardiff City FC, going around the stadium and meeting Ollie and talking about things, Brad and I both like, wow, like he would be a great fit for us if this could really happen. And I think it just, when we're talking about the partnership, it shows the next level of the partnership now, because now we actually have a student or a former student of Met now on our staff for the next 2 years. And I really could see it going up the same way. Like, I think we could eventually be sending a student who graduates from our program over to do their master's at Cardiff. And so Ollie is he's been terrific. He's brought something to us that obviously we could never replicate. And I think, and I hope, and I know that he's learning a lot from us, because we basically dropped him. I think he's been here for 6 weeks, and I think he's already worked on at least 7 ESPN shows in quite big roles for us in terms of graphics and some other things. He led a creative shoot with our football team, or your soccer, our soccer team, with a couple of our students just this week, and it's been a real joy to have him here, and just another example of how this relationship, I think, again has grown, and not to say it again, but it's taken on a life of its own. It's really awesome.
It really is that next level, isn't it? And in terms of your students, do they do much work outside of the course? Do they go and get their own work experience? And also your former students as well, what have they gone on to work in?
Yes, the answer is yes. They, we're very busy with what we do in terms of an academic year, but Indiana is a great sports state. The city of Indianapolis, Indiana, which is just down the road from us. We have an NFL team, we have an NBA team, we have the largest one-day sporting event in the world with the Indianapolis 500. We have Major League Baseball, we have minor league baseball, professional soccer, production houses. So there's a lot of opportunity for our students to work on those things, over the summer, or get internships, not just in our state, but really around the United States. So yeah, we encourage that. We hope to facilitate that. We want them to do internships. We want them to get experience outside of just us, to help build their portfolio and their resumes. And we've seen a majority of our students, in a sense, kind of leapfrog what could be an entry-level job at many of those places, and kind of move right into that, that second-level type job because of the 4 years or the experience that they've gained as part of our program, which is really, really cool. So yeah, we have graduates all over the United States working, working at ESPN or Turner Sports or Fox Sports. A large number of our students are working in professional sports, from the NFL to the NBA, to IndyCar racing, to NASCAR racing, everywhere in between. And then probably the largest majority of our students are actually working in NCAA college athletics departments, creating video or creative content producers for a team or a brand, if you will. So it's quite good. It's crazy to see how many folks we have out there now. And when you think about that, basically it's a 4-year degree, wherein, this is year 11 for me. So some of our folks haven't been out in the workforce more than maybe 5 or 6 years, and they're already in really key positions. And now we're just building that network and that SL family and across the country in sports. And it's really exciting to see.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it just shows how successful the course is, really. The whole point of this podcast really is to give advice for those looking to break into the sport media industry, whether they're a student or whether they're looking for a career change. Advice can be a difficult thing, but do you have any advice for people looking to break into the sport media industry?
Well, be curious is something that I would always say. And I think you could divvy that up into multiple ways of being curious. You certainly need to be curious about a story or a storyteller, or what could you do, or how you could be creative, but also be curious in terms of roles and opportunities in the industry. I think I know that a lot of young people, at least those here in the United States who enter our program, they only see sports from what they have seen on television or heard on the radio, right? So like, oh, I want to be an announcer or I want to be a sideline reporter because that's who they see or that's what they, that's what they're exposed to. It's always quite eye-opening for some students to see that, okay, there's a play-by-play announcer, there's a color commentator, and maybe there's a sideline reporter. Those are 3 people. But then there are 17 to 20 other people who are working on this broadcast. And those are the roles that you could be in too. So be curious, right? Like you never know that what role that might be. And we were just talking about, a big time sports production is easily 20 people or more. And at the professional levels, those crews could reach into the hundreds, right? Like when you're talking about Super Bowls and March Madness and Wimbledon and all those things that we think of, there's so many opportunities. That's more than just the announcer or the play-by-play person that you see on the TV or you hear. So be curious. The other thing I think I would say is be opportunistic. You never know who's watching or who's listening or where a contact could be made. So be opportunistic that everyone you interact with could and probably can and maybe will influence your future. There's this thing I love, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, or whatever, but there's this story, this philosophy, this science that's called 6 degrees of separation, which means that everyone in the world is separated from everyone else by 6 people. Like you could go through and say, hey, I know this person, I know this person, I know this person, I work with this person. And by doing that, you're connected to everyone in the world by 6 people. I've never tested it other than I know that it's true in my life, it seems like. And I think in sports, I say you're connected by 3 people. And that's where being opportunistic is important because you just never know, right? Like, I would have never met Ollie if it wasn't for Joe. And then Ollie would have never met someone now who works at ESPN if it wasn't for me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like some craziness that happens there. So being opportunistic to not shun an opportunity or to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or I don't want to just be a grip or I don't want to just, intern there. That's the attitude that doesn't make it in our industry. But if you're opportunistic and you go do something and you learn something, whether it's what you want to do or not, you're probably going to meet someone that can help you get to that next point. So I'll keep it very simple for you. Be curious and be opportunistic would be the advice that I would give to those wanting to work in this industry.
That's some great advice. And I hadn't heard that you're all connected by 6 people before either, which is really interesting. I'll have to look into that myself, I think. But it's been terrific to have you on, CT. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, it's awesome. I appreciate you, A, wanting to have me on, and 2, that even you and I, and we're connecting through this whole thing of what we've done, and just another example of how all this works. And so I'm proud of you and proud of all you guys over there and gals over there. We just keep growing our connection, which is awesome.
Thank you for listening to episode 5 of Rich's Sports Media Show. If you enjoyed, make sure to look out for the following episode. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook if you would like to follow for regular content.